which would ensure that happened.
The question posed at the during the site visit was about drainage associated with the trees being removed on the so-called scrubland, or what we've now come to call it the Devon Hedge Bank, and that required to show a drainage plan coming out of the car park, the upper car park, and also the lower car park, because there wouldn't be absorption by the tree roots anymore. Your slides didn't really address that.
I reviewed the flood risk assessment after that comment, and there is no specific reference in the flood risk assessment to the trees retain, the hedge bank retaining any water. However, the risk assessment was based on the proposed scheme, so it would have taken, in my view, into account the drainage spot, that's also within that tree hedge bank, but there's no reference specifically to it in the flood risk assessment.
How many questions have you got before?
One more for the case officer.
That's fine.
Okay, thank you. You've repeated that the application is in line with local planning, but in fact, the Ivy Ridge neighbourhood plan doesn't support this development in the way that it is being proposed. It asked for an overview of all the developments that could be taken place, and indeed in the first offer there was a hotel and takeaway, a drive-through, and a pub. But there has been no overall scheme that goes along with this Ivy Bridge neighbourhood plan. I think that there's a fundamental problem then with the application.
Yes, thank you. And yes, I did acknowledge that in the planning report, that it didn't wholly meet the INP2 allocation. However, I think there's 2 points to be made in reference to that. The allocation itself is much wider than the application site currently before us, so there is still potential for those other uses to come forward at some point in the future as a result of other land ownerships and users wishing to pursue alternative uses. So this doesn't negate the possibility of that allocation being fully provided. And in relation to the fact that there should have been a master plan, again, I've acknowledged that in my planning report. Unfortunately, with allocations, you are dealing with a number of different landowners, and it's not always the case that all landowners want to redevelop at the same time. As I understand it, at the pre-app stage of the application, the officer acknowledged that the police station, for example, which is included in the allocation, and also the scout hut, were not of a mind to redevelop it at any time now or in the immediate future. So very hard then to ask for a master plan when there are certain landowners who are not party to that process.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson and then Councillor McKay. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I've got 4 questions. My first question is really with concern around the town centre, and I'm not convinced how assessment has been carried out to make sure that during the period of construction and the absence of easily accessible parking spaces for that are generally used to facilitate the town centre, how the town centre is going to be okay, because in terms of the shops, the retail offer that's there at the moment, there is clearly a fear. The economic assessment I've read by our assets manager doesn't make reference to any survey having been carried out. It just says that it gives an opinion, essentially. that this is all going to be okay. So I'm not, I just wonder really what assessment's been carried out, because when the initial
Councillor, what did I say just now? I know what you're trying to just, what you're asking, whether there was a survey done or not. Reece, we don't want, we're going to be here a long time.
Well, all I was going to make reference to, Chairman, if I may, was the fact that when the 9 million assessment was made in terms of us doing this some year or so ago now, probably, we were given to believe that everybody was really in favour of this, and I don't see that reflected in either number of objections or any survey being carried out to, give a bit of actual evidence to that. The second question, again, around the whole thing about concerns around the ecology, and I can't see how it's possible to offset biodiversity, and it's not a crisis, by the way, it's an emergency. That's what we've agreed here. How you can create a small woodland to replace actually what is an important link in a wildlife corridor. The wildlife corridors can be potentially redeveloped elsewhere, but I mean, given the urban environment that's here, that would be very challenging. So I think we need to recognise the value of this as a wildlife corridor. So I just wonder why that wasn't considered, and it was just a small woodland. I noticed that in one of our own officers, the landscape officers' concerns is some of the replacement trees aren't native, and that could offer a better biodiversity net gain on site as well. I wonder why that's been acceptable. I wonder really whether an alternative site altogether was considered for this. I can't see that seems to have been addressed, unless I've missed something significant. This is a huge amount. My mother used to use the expression trying to squeeze a pint into a pint pot. We've got a very limited area here with real constraints. I wonder whether alternative sites were considered. And I suppose my fourth point really is, I can't understand why South Hams is doing this. I haven't yet to have a justification.
But we have our economic development specialist here today. So the first question with regard to the assessment of the retail issues on the town centre, I'll pass over to Chris Shears, and he might be able to provide you with an answer.
Hi everyone. So I think that actually the mitigation measures that are being put in place during the construction phase are relatively strong. I think that in terms of the town centre parking, I think that at present there's underutilisation of the town's car parks, and I think that having the shuttle bus from the station is a positive to be putting in place during this process. I recognise that it's not a perfect situation. I don't think there is a perfect situation when you're looking at a major piece of construction going into a town.
Please, I know. Just let the gentleman speak. You might not agree with him, but just let him speak, please.
Thank you. So I don't think that there is a perfect solution, but I think that this is the best possible solution during the construction phase. I did mention in my report that I suggested that some priority be given to people who work within the town to ensure that there were spaces for them up at the station, so that they weren't detrimentally impacted, because I know that a lot of people who drive into Ivy Bridge to work will park in the existing car park provision. So I think that needs to be taken into consideration. But in terms of the mitigation measures, I think that it's the best that could be done in these circumstances.
Thank you.
Kevin, I did ask if there had been a survey conducted.
Yeah, I was coming back to that actually.
I can't answer that one.
That it, right. Councillor McCain.
So
Three other questions. Okay, come on.
in relation to the second question, I'll pass over to my colleagues who are experts in trees and landscape to answer your question with regard to why a wildlife corridor is not considered as mitigation, and also in relation to the fact that the hedge on site is potentially a wildlife corridor, and also in relation to the natives, the lack of native trees, please.
Morning, members. Also, I've been brought in right at the last minute to cover this application today, so I've read as much of the documents as I could. In regard to the assessment, I'm assuming that the ecological assessment will have looked at potential corridor presence of the vegetation that links through the car park, and they would have to mitigate that key issue there would be around bats. And obviously I understand there's going to be another bat survey carried out before any works go ahead to mitigate if there's any interruption.
In relation to the issue of native trees, that's for this, not easier. My original landscape comments were made on the basis of the first iteration of the landscape plans. They were proposing to remove 23 of the 24 trees on site and to replace with 28 trees on site. And I identified that a number of those were non-natives and questioned that. Since then, they've come back with, there've been further discussions, and they've come back with a proposal that now provides 45 trees on site in addition to the off-site mitigation. And the vast majority of those are now natives, as I've requested in my original feedback. So I'm much more confident now that there is a predominantly native presence of trees proposed on site. My understanding is that all of the off-site mitigation will also be natives only.
So in terms of whether any alternative sites were considered, I think that's a question probably you need to ask the applicant. We've been asked to look at this application in front of us that we're presenting to you now. And so I think it's probably a question for the applicant when they speak later.
Is that all your questions, Janice? Not today, I think. Yes, right. You've got one you can ask later if it's the right person. Okay. Yes.
Sorry, I should have mentioned this before we went to questions. In respect of something Alex Wish just said, I should have earlier extended the apologies from Lee Marshall. He's not here because he's in Torbay Hospital having emergency eye surgery. Couldn't be because the nature of it couldn't be put back. This the first date he was given to that. So apologies. That's why Alex has stepped in for Lee at the last minute, but that's the reason why.
Chairman, I might just point out that actually this would be an ecologist should be answering some of these questions. We did ask for that on Monday.
So, sorry, Chair, yeah, there is an ecologist. He's online actually. He's not able to come to the meeting, but his name is Mike Waller, and he is available to answer any ecology questions should you wish him to.
My question about biodiversity was sort of answered by Alex Wish, but you had made an assumption in your response that it had been looked at, and I'd be interested if that was considered, whether that was therefore dismissed. Why we come to the conclusion of having a woodland, small woodland, why I say, new woodland, which won't have any value for a long time, compared to the wildlife corridor that's being moved. Biodiversity is a really important part of
it. Sorry, we've got who was it online? Sorry.
Mike Waller.
Mike Waller. Are you there, Mr. Waller?
Oh, yes, I am. Can everyone hear me?
Yeah, it is still being recorded.
To the mic.
But I'm just picking up.
We can't hear you very well.
Can't hear me very well. Sorry, it's not the best connection in here, I'm afraid.
Okay, Nikki, bye.
Yes, so in terms of the central sort of hedge bank and oak trees being considered a wildlife corridor, it was considered, and so that was factored into the biodiversity net gain assessment, which was completed by EAD Ecology. And so what they did find from the survey was that the most important wildlife corridor was the River just immediately to the left-hand side. That was the most important corridor on site because of its value, particularly for lesser horseshoe bats. And then my understanding is that there'll be a lighting plan, so that won't be affected. But through the calculations, and it's a DEFRA metric 3.0, it's the newest metric. Those calculations clearly show that the off-site mitigation is more than enough, more than suitable to mitigate the loss of that row of trees, which could be considered a corridor in some respects. But as I say, by far the most important corridor is the River to the west of the site. So that the row of the Devon hedgebank and trees in the central part had some value for foraging bats, but it wasn't seen to be a hugely important wildlife corridor through the landscape. That was very much more the River. And so we were happy that the calculations that were presented more than mitigated for the loss of that central belt, if you like, that Devon hedge bank and trees. It's actually the off-site mitigation isn't just trees; it's scrub as well, which is again it's an important habitat, and it would be managed to a good condition. So that would be a very valuable habitat indeed, and so that's why that achieves around a 12% net gain overall.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, you may.
So when would you expect the off-site mitigation to be effective as a replacement habitat? And what would be the timeline when it would actually be at the magnitude of what's being taken away?
Yeah, so my understanding is that it would have to be managed. Well, I mean, scrub doesn't take as long to get into a good condition, but it would be managed for, I think, a 30-year period. So, you know, it could be much sooner than that. I would expect it to be sooner, particularly as it is mostly a scrub sort of ecotonal habitat between woodland and grassland. So it could be down to sort of 10, 15 years. So it can be quite a short period of time. Obviously, it will take longer for trees to mature to the level of trees that we're seeing lost in the central area. But provided the management is in place for that 30-year period and beyond, then it would be adequate mitigation.
Thank you. So you're saying a minimum of 10 years, probably 15, more likely 30. Is that what I heard? Because I could difficult to hear. Yeah, thank you. So I'll just make that clear. Thank you for that. We'll move on to Councillor McKay, if we may.
Thank you. The cost of mitigation. I mean, this is further to Councillor Hodgson's questions. Really, is written up as 127,000. It would be interesting to know. Sorry. 172,000. I would like to understand how that figure has been arrived at, and because the removal of that bank, I would have said has a value much greater than that, and the area that is going to be used to mitigate this loss. If you look at it on Google Earth, which I just did, it looks like it's already grassland. It's already densely populated with trees down one edge. What exactly the diagram that was put up indicated a small area that was going to be planted. I'm not convinced that there's anything like sufficient mitigation going on there. Exactly. I mean, you can see it's already got a lot of woods. To remove that bank and to only have that figure to hand in order to manage that over possibly 30 years and beyond does not seem anything like sufficient.
Well, that's more for the debate, but I understand where you're coming
Well,
from.
it's my question as to how that figure was arrived at.
That's what I want to. How did we come to that figure?
The stab at that one. Okay, so for trees, there are systems in place that allow you to place a monetary value. That's a very useful technique for working out how much the loss of a tree has in monetary terms. And the system that's been used for this, I understand, was CAVAT. So that's capital asset evaluation of amenity trees. So each tree is individually assessed and a monetary value apportioned to it, and then the sum of those is added up, and that's an assumption. My assumption is that is what the 172 figure reached.
So the tree that is some would argue is better and others wouldn't, but is nonetheless notable. It's clearly several hundred years old. Could you possibly put a figure on that? Is there a formula that would?
I understand there is this formula. Yeah, whether we agree with the formula.
I'd like to understand what a tree like that is normally assessed as being worth.
Sorry, I haven't got that specific information.
Okay.
On each of the individual trees that was calculated. I just know the sum was 1 to.
Councillor Brazil.
I was just wondering if we could direct that question to Mike Waller as an ecologist. He perhaps could give us a value of that tree, as per se. Just to say, I mean, obviously there are hundreds and hundreds of representations in this application. Do we have the detailed ecologist report that spells out exactly how each particular tree has been valued, so that we can work out whether the offset is? I just put that as a question.
You've asked a question. Mr. Waller, can you answer that?
Yep, I can. I'm afraid I don't know the exact calculations, the formula for the individual trees, but as I mentioned previously, what I do know is that a biodiversity net gain metric has been filled out based on all of the habitats that are present, including the notable trees, and that's been put through the calculation to get a feel to calculate the baseline value of the entire site, and so then that's then been put against the proposed mitigation here, and that's what it gives you is this net gain. So but I'm afraid I don't have the exact formula to hand of how individual trees are valued, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I've got a few more questions. Obviously, I'm going to raise that specific issue about the specific tree during the debate, but I think that would be better out there. We've had quite often, and this may have been answered already, you quoted a retail impact assessment, but then we seem to be saying we haven't got a retail impact assessment. Could I have a bit of clarification around that, please?
So the applicant employed somebody to provide a retail impact assessment, which is referred to in my report and is available online. And that retail impact assessment did two things. It looked at the sequential approach to retail development, and it also did the retail impact assessment within the same document. And it is available and is referred to in my report.
Just following on from that, then, or is that I see that the co-op have submitted an extensive report, and in that they query the validity both of the data used within that retail impact assessment, i.e., it's not up to date, and secondly, they talk about the sequential test and that is far from complete. And it doesn't, and it's just mentioned sequential test, but it doesn't actually go into any methodology, quantitative or qualitative, about how they've used that. I just wonder if you've got any comments on that, please.
Again, I'll refer to my report. I provided quite a detailed section on the retail impact. They did assess the sequential test in their retail impact assessment, and they did carry out a retail impact assessment. The data, as I understand it, some of it was 2 or 3 years old, I think, but they indicated in the report that where necessary, they had sought additional, more up-to-date information. My role in this is not to necessarily interrogate the report to a degree which of which you're just what you're, you know, we have to a degree we have to base our planning recommendation on the reports that are submitted and the fact that they are accurate.
Okay, thank you. Just 2 or 3 quick more questions, if I may.
That's fine.
In the economic assessment from our economic development specialist, you mentioned in that report that this car park should be 3 hours. They've only given an hour and a half. How do you think that affects the viability of the rest of Harvey Bridge, given that it's half the amount of time that you said?
I think that in an ideal world, I would still be pushing for the 3 hours, but I think that in the current circumstances, looking at the car parking that South Hams will retain ownership of, that will create an opportunity for people to come into the town, to dwell in the town as well while they're here. and to spend that time to visit the shops and the cafes and to enjoy the waterside as well. And so as I think was mentioned in Jacqueline's report already, for people who are using the Aldi store specifically, having the 90 minutes there will still present time to go and shop in other places, although you wouldn't expect those people to then have enough time to sort of sit in a cafe and have a coffee and those sorts of things. I think that so I think that the two elements of the car park would effectively serve different purposes in that respect.
No, thank you for that clarification. Two more quick questions. First of all, the skate park, obviously, if you don't replace the skate park, it's against MPPF. What pre-applications have been done for this new application?
So the skate park issue, as I understand it, has been negotiated during the lifetime of the application, not at pre-app. The applicant has negotiated and discussed, I think, with Skate Devon, who submitted an objection to the application initially, and they have then since sent an email indicating that they no longer have their objection because they are satisfied with the proposed alternative site for the skate park.
Okay, I mean, I'll take it there is no pre-app. So what really I was getting at is what biodiversity, visual impact, amenity impact with that new skate park. We haven't done any of that. That's all.
No, we haven't. That would have to happen.
That would have to be.
Yeah,
okay.
sorry,
Okay.
I misunderstood your question.
My last one is about I read the landscape report here with interest, but you don't come to a conclusion. I mean, can I just put you on the spot here? I mean, do you oppose this application on visual impact assessment?
Having seen the revised plans, I now feel it's policy compliant. It doesn't. Having seen the revised plans and the work that we've done to strengthen the landscape proposals, I'm satisfied as it complies with policy. There is inevitably going to be a fundamental change on that site, but the site is within the town centre. It therefore is an urban character, so the overall character won't change. What will change is the density of development and built form on the site. The issue of design, I haven't touched upon. I focused purely on the landscape proposals there, and I'm satisfied that in terms of the mitigation and enhancements that have been put forward to support the admittedly constrained landscape scheme, because there is a lot of built form and not much space to put trees and shrubs in there. I'm satisfied that they've now done what they can on the site to actually provide an acceptable scheme for a town centre development. So in my view, there's no contradiction with our adopted policy.
Okay, well, that's sort of answered it. I will be quoting from your report during my things on that because
all I would say is that we, as far as I know, they're not online at the moment, but we have subsequently had revised landscape plan. My comments were focusing purely on the planting proposals, wildland elements.
Yeah, that's not quite what your report says from the landscape officer, is it? You talk about the view, the fact that you lose that central green area as you come from Glanville Mill and walk into the site. At the moment, you see that rather lovely foliage, and you comment on that, how all that's lost. But you're saying that that's okay, right?
No, what I say, I mean, there is inevitably going to be a change. The issue has to be weighed in the planning balance about whether the change is acceptable when compared against the potential benefits of the development. And I didn't make a statement on that, no.
Okay, thank you.
Is that you finished, Councillor Brazil? For a minute, yeah, okay. I've got Councillor Thomas, then Councillor Pringle, then Councillor Long. So Councillor Thomas.
Thanks, Ben. You'll be aware that I didn't make the site visit. For the benefit of people listening, I'm the member for Newton and Yampton, so Ivy Bridge is the nearest town to my walls, and I know it well. I would like to ask a question about the site visit, and then I'd like to ask another question of Ms Asler, please. So my first question is, at the site visit, did councillors have the opportunity to look at the Harford Road and Keaton Road car parks? And my second question, which is also around car parking, I mean, the essence of the report is that it's considered on balance that the proposal is acceptable and that only a small loss once the scheme is completed. I mean, it's a point of debate that never did an adverb carry such a heavy weight as the use of the word once, as in once the proposal, once the scheme's completed. My question is about the numbers on page 29 of the report, the car parking numbers, and the graph that follows on page 30, because I just want to understand, Ms Aslinder, so I'm clear. The graph that says that there are always at least 99 spaces available doesn't include the rail park and ride and doesn't include Court. So it follows that if we were to lose 235 spaces during the course of the construction, obviously we wouldn't have 99 spaces free. Indeed, there'd be a loss because we're only looking at what's left in Harford Road and Eaton Road. So does it therefore follow that the mitigation, the car park mitigation provided during construction is entirely based around people being able to use the rail station park and ride and the shuttle service that you're putting on? Because I think if councillors had been to Harford Road and Keaton Road, they would have seen, as is acknowledged with Court in the report, that these car parks are almost always full all the time, and that any free spaces contained within the report must be within Glanville's Mill or Leonard's Road at the moment, which by their very nature will disappear. Do you understand what I mean? That the only mitigation based on this report could be that if I want to travel into Ivy Bridge while construction is going on, I've got to park at the park and ride and then get a shuttle down. And is that therefore the council's mitigation on parking during the build? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, so the parking report, which is also available online, this does not include Court, because that, as I understand it, the reason that wasn't included was because it's a private car park, I think, and not Southam's. However, they did also include Leonard's Road, Harford Road and Keaton Road, which I think are also not owned by Southampton. Oh no, yeah, I think they are. I think the main emphasis of the consideration was based around Southam's parking provision. One of the mitigation is that people should park in the station car park and use the shuttle bus. Absolutely, that's probably the main mitigation. But the other mitigations identified in the report and in my report are to use Harford Road, to use Keaton Road, to use Court. I think you have to get there quite early in order to use Court. I think it gets full quite frequently and quite quickly. But there are other things. So they've made an accessibility space, an additional accessibility space in one of the car parks, and the other question you asked was whether or not members visited the two car parks on the site visit, and they didn't. Is that a question? I'm not sure it does.
I think it does, but just on a point of fact, I don't believe Keaton Road is a district council car park, Mr. Chairman.
No, I don't think it is.
Finished? I think, okay, I think you made your point. Right. Councillor Pringle.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, actually, Councillor Thomas has stolen my thunder in a bit because I was going to talk about the car parks. Southam's only actually owns 3 of those car parks. The station car park and Court and Keaton Road aren't owned by Southam's. Court you can't get in anyway. Keaton Road, I'm surprised if anybody parks in there given the issues that's been in there for many, many years that Councillor Crode has dealt with, and I'd be surprised if anybody parked in there. So Harford Road is the only other one that's close to the town and hasn't got many spaces. So everybody's reliant on the other 2 car parking spaces. So you say that those car parks will remain open. Southam's don't actually own them. They're owned by private entities. So how can you say that they're going to remain open if they decide to close them? So I am relying on the study that was carried out by the applicant, the car parking capacity. That is what the study is. Also, I hope you're going to have several shuttle buses running because with people and shopping and children and prams and everything else. you need the space. Just to clarify, the provision of this will be included within the Section 106 agreement or carried out. A lot of people will be parking around the streets of Art Bridge as opposed to.
Thank you. Councillor Long.
Thank you, Chairman. First question to Ms Houselander. Can I go back to the actual plans and planning? You stated the building and car park cannot be secured without loss of the trees. Now, can you explain or sort of, give some indication whether the applicant has actually looked, because there are obviously issues with design, the Devon Bank, the trees, the oak trees, all of that, whether alternative plans were actually drawn up or considered to provide something on site, because obviously what we're looking at here is what is wanted, so therefore they've made the area fit. And I wonder whether there were any plans were actually sort of considered all the aspects of the site, looked at alternative plans.
And my colleague,
Councillor, I think that's probably a question best put to the speaker who's been speaking in support of the application. We've got the application in front of us. I genuinely don't know whether other designs were considered before they came in. Certainly, there was no other designs have been submitted as part of this application. So I don't think it's a question that Mrs Houselander can answer, but I think it's one that you really should be putting to the person who's speaking on behalf of the applicant.
One further question.
Well, I've allowed some up to 4, I think. So I think the second one's quite acceptable.
Can I go back to Sir Ask's question? I'm not sure whether this is Mike Waller or Alex Wish. Can somebody explain to me why there is, if I'm just focusing on the issue of the veteran tree in that Devon Bank, why there is a disagreement or disparity on the point of a tree being a veteran tree between the applicant's arboricultural specialist and a body such as the Woodland Trust? Because I think, they are used to dealing with this, and I know you can mostly get a room full of academics and get, you've got 20 academics, you'll get 20 decisions, but I think on something like this, it's fairly fundamental. I'd just like a sort of a better understanding on that.
In the first instance, I'll have a go at that. I think you've said it yourself, academics all looking at the same thing may come to different conclusions. I think what's really important to understand is that around assessing a veteran tree, ancient trees, it's fundamental and very important that you get it right, because of the consequences of not getting it. And there are clear consequences if a tree is evaluated in that way. But it's really important that that process is clear, transparent, and understandable. Obviously, I've not assessed these trees. I've read the 2 reports. I've read the tree officer's report, and I've read the report that was submitted. And in looking at the criteria that's set by the Woodland Trust, so actually anybody who's assessing these trees is using criteria that's been set and established by the Woodland and others, have to go through a methodological process to understand what are the characteristics of a veteran tree. I'll just throw in as well is there is a difference between ancient trees and veteran trees. Ancient trees have the age for an oak that's over 300 years for it to become considered to be an ancient tree. The veteran tree has a whole set of criteria that one has to look at and work through and understand and observe the tree to see if they are present. So that process has been carried out, and the conclusion was that the tree that's been identified, T8, doesn't have enough of the features to take it into the veteran tree consideration category. The Woodland Trust, which is a more recent, I understand, designation, so anybody can go online, put forward that a tree is a veteran tree if they believe it is, and they can look at notable trees. So notable is the next category down. I've not seen the Woodland Trust And then when you submitted that, it's verified. I've not seen the verification from the Woodland Trust as to why they agreed that it was a veteran tree. Because again, I was only involved in this from yesterday. So I've emailed them straight away and said, can we have that information? They're so overrun, it can take up to 15 days to come in. So I have asked that question because it's relevant to us as an authority that we know which trees are being categorised as veteran trees, because we as an authority will then need to manage them in a different way and treat them with the due regard that they absolutely deserve. So I think the case is at the moment, two professionals have looked at it. They've looked at it very carefully. They know the consequences of getting it wrong and getting it right. They are completely satisfied there are not enough of those features that was changed into being a veteran tree. So the real feature that they had identified is a reduction of the crown, and there is some dead wood within the crown of that tree. And the most likelihood cause of that is damage caused by previous management by the council. Probably, I think, 20 years ago. It's before my time even. I've been with the authority for over 17 years. That's before I arrived at the authority. Works were carried out to that tree, and that has consequently resulted in the features that have appeared on that tree now. And then they do not align with those that you'd expect to see with a veteran. There are no other indication of those there at all. And of course, that tree was in a hedgerow, it was in fields, and it's got a car park on either side of it. So the likelihood of that car park going in will have had an impact on that set of trees. And again, from my observations, because I'm in the tree, and anyway, that will have had an impact on its viability and its condition, and that would have artificially given it some of those characteristics that may have been picked up later as a veteran.
Mr. Weimer?
Councillor, I understand that the applicant's arborist or arboricultural consultant is also in the room, so it may be when the applicant's representative speaking that the question can be answered with their arborist at the same time.
Any other questions? No, no. You've had it. Yeah, you had your opportunity, but I've got a question actually, if you don't mind for a second. Right. It's about flooding. Strangely enough, yesterday in my capacity as chairman, I attended a course on flooding. And it made plainly obvious to me and all other councils, as with councils throughout the country, that we are not taking enough notice of flood zones. And this was run by the Environmental Agency. And I see we're in flood zone 1, 2, and 3. And it says there that the only reason we can build on flood zone 1 is there's no other sites available and that we can mitigate the fact that we're on flood zone 1. Are the officers satisfied that we are complying with flooding as it is today?
Yes. The Ivy Bridge is in a critical drainage area, and it's also, most of the site is actually in flood zone 1, and that is an area where we would be permitted to grant permission for development in terms of those flood zones. Flood zones 2 and 3 are the areas where we need to carry out a sequential approach to the development, which is contained in my report, which we have done. Because of the nature of this and size of the development, it's going to be quite tricky to get such a development on another site, which isn't affected by flooding, and particularly as Ivy Bridge is in a critical drainage area. But the flood risk assessment has indicated mitigation proposals, including the swale, which will impact on the route of the floodwater which runs the southeast side of the site. And in addition, we have consulted the Environment Agency and the lead local flood authority at Devon County Council, both of whom are satisfied that the flooding, that the development will not increase flooding off-site.
Thank you for that, but I think you'll find that there will be changes to that very soon, but we can only do it on today's rules and regulations, but quite a lot yesterday on this. Thank you. Right. we finished with the questions. Do you want, is it different? Right, okay.
It's unique.
We'll see.
My question is about the fact that the council has declared a climate emergency, and therefore I'm a bit disappointed to see that the cladding is made of cement fibre, which is not a very sustainable material, with high carbon cost in its production. What assessment has been made as the total carbon cost of building this site, not its ongoing sustainability, but the actual cost of build in terms of carbon?
So I tried to find out some information about this after the site visit on Monday, and I spoke to our internal person who deals with carbon reduction proposals that we often get, and he has explained that the amount of work required in order to make that assessment he didn't have time between Monday and today to be able to do that. And indeed, he also questioned whether or not you could do it. He's not known it'd be done on other schemes. So so that was the answer I received. So apologies, I can't offer any other advice than that.
Okay, but the actual materials that are being used for the build, I mean, has there been any attempt to choose less damaging carbon intensive materials? I mean, I don't know what the foundations are going to be made of. I imagine it's a great deal of concrete.
I think that's a question you ought to save up for the applicant, actually. Okay, thank you. Is there no more questions of the officer? I now ask Joe Burgess. I don't know if you're a councillor or just a resident or whatever, but welcome. We have 5 minutes. Yes, just double checking. You have 5 minutes to do your presentation, and please go ahead. Make sure you switch on your mic.
Thank you. I have lived in Ivy Bridge for 32 years and do most of my shopping in the town. I do not object to the principle of an Aldi, but as a former planning officer with over 30 years in the development management role, I am aware that when it comes to planning applications, the devil is in the detail. I'm sure your site visit was helpful in this regard. The application does not fully address all the issues raised by the original planning officer at the pre-application stage, or those issues that have emerged since. You are required to make a balanced planning decision which takes into account all the material planning considerations with all the relevant information before you. The report contains errors and omits significant material information and glosses over important matters. In my view, the planning balance is that planning permission should be refused for the following reasons. 1. Retail impact. The Co-op has challenged the submitted retail impact assessment and raises issues that should be independently assessed. The Co-op report is not mentioned. 2. Impact on available parking during construction. Councillors should know that the recent bridge replacement meant Glanville's Mill car park was unavailable for 1 day, and one busy shop saw a 50% decrease in takings. Also, without an assessment of replacement disabled parking provision in Glanville's Mill car park during construction, the council may be open to a discrimination claim under the Equalities Act 2010. A shuttle bus is not a feasible alternative for many of those who regularly access the facilities in the town. 3. Long-term impact on available parking. The recent survey does not reflect the experience of regular users of the town. There are errors in the report with respect to the parking figures. There are currently 227 unrestricted parking spaces. Only 113 are proposed for non-Aldi shoppers. 4. By virtue of its design, massing and siting, the proposed building and associated car park will be detrimental to the character and appearance of the town. In particular, it will be overbearing and dominant beside the river, contrary to a number of policies and the objectives of the MPPF. This requires that development fosters a well-designed, beautiful and safe place. 5. The development does not achieve a safe place. The Devon and Cornwall Police Designing Out Crime Officer states that she is unable to support the application from a security and safety perspective. These comments are not included in the planning officer's report. Neither is there any mention in the report of the clear conflict between the need for lighting to illuminate the whole car park identified by the police officer and the comment by the ecologist that the amount of lighting along the river corridor should be reduced to avoid negative impact on foraging bats, mentioned in conditions 16 and 22. Although the Scape Group is now happy with the site behind the leisure centre, the site lacks natural surveillance, and if lighting is required, the police officer and ecologist are likely to have similar conflicting concerns. 6. Loss of prominent and established trees in a historic boundary, which the landscape officer states currently affords high amenity value. The slide shows the historic provenance of the hedgerow and the tree. A local tree consultant with over 25 years experience and the lead verifier of the veteran trees for the Woodland Trust have concluded one tree estimated to be 281 years old is a veteran tree, and it has been added to the ancient tree inventory. The Planner's Manual for Ancient Woodland and Veteran Trees 2019 states, where ancient woodland or veteran trees are lost or damaged, there will always be a net loss of biodiversity, and it is impossible to secure net gain. The South Hams SPD clearly states development resulting in the loss or deterioration of the quality of irreplaceable habitats, such as ancient woodland, aged or veteran trees, should be refused unless able to demonstrate the need for and benefits of the development in that location, clearly outweighing the loss. If the trees were not in the ownership of the council, it seems likely they would have been protected by TPO, and that development resulting in their loss would have been strongly resisted. Is this a case of double standards? It appears that the planning officer, who has been brought in at the last minute to produce the report before you, has been instructed by the senior management team to write it up for approval. I would urge you to scrutinise this report very carefully, consider all the representations from our MP, members of the public, business owners in the town and the town council, and if democracy counts for anything, refuse the application, or at the very least defer the decision to enable a more comprehensive and accurate report to be put before you. Any independent scrutiny of this matter to ensure transparency and due process is unlikely to be satisfied with verbal updates on what are significant material planning considerations. As the Chamber of Commerce has stated, the Ivy Bridge regeneration plan started with good intentions, but without a police station site. On my very last sentence, can I finish the sentence? Am I permitted to finish my sentence? Thank you.
Yes, could you?
But without the police station site, the development is not able to achieve those intentions. Instead of regenerating the town centre, objectives have concluded that the matters which are not included in the officer's report clearly demonstrate the proposed development will have a significant detrimental impact on the viability of existing businesses and the vitality of the wider town. And once the damage is done, there will be no going back. Thank you.
Thank you for that report. Before I ask any members for any questions, the monitor officer wishes to say something.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Bush, you referred to the officers being put under pressure by the senior leadership team. Obviously, you didn't hear at the beginning what I said about the independence of the planning officer, and I'd be grateful if you'd retract the remark that you made, because I don't believe there are any grounds for it.
I did write my speech before obviously hearing your thing, and I tried to word it so that it wasn't controversial, but of course I take on board exactly what you say.
Thank you very much.
Right. Questions? The bus. Councillor Brazil.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you very much for that comprehensive presentation. You stated that you have 30 years experience, I think, as a planning officer. As a planning officer, we talked about the retail impact assessment, and you said that particularly given the co-op's response to this, that there should be an independent. In your experience, is this a normal occasion that the applicant provides their own assessment, or is there usually an independent assessment of these matters?
I never dealt with an application from the council that I worked for, where they were the applicant and they own the land. And what happened when I was working in Plymouth was we had an application of Tesco, and our economic development officer interrogated the retail impact assessment, disputed it, and we refused the application on retail grounds, and that was appealed, and the appeal was upheld. So the City Council was able to prevent that development, which would have had a considerable impact on the nearby shops. So I've not been in this situation, and I think I can understand why members of the public who don't understand that district council, city councils can make applications to themselves, that I think to the general public seems a bit sort of, stacks of questions to be answered. But I understand why and how that's the case. But I would have expected that, being as South Hams are the applicant and they own the land, that it wouldn't just be their retail people who would look at it, because obviously they're all in, as far as I'm aware, I may be wrong, in the sort of same section that you get somebody outside, especially when you've got a comprehensive, and I've read the co-ops report, and there are lots of really important issues in there that haven't been addressed in the officers' report. And obviously they query a lot of the conclusions in the applicant's retail impact assessment. So I would have thought it was prudent, and from a accountability point of view, for the council to ask somebody to look at it, an independent person to look at both reports and have a conclusion before making that final assessment.
Any other question? No? Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we now move on to the applicant and supporter, Mr. Martin Simpson. Again, sir, you have 5 minutes and you may well be questioned afterwards.
Okay, so good. The discussion surrounding the centre of Ivy Bridge is one that has been had over many years. With the influx of new housing developments and changing expectations, the village is now the largest town settlement within the South Hams district. And as such, it is vital that local infrastructure and town centre services match the needs of the community. The proposed regeneration project is more than just the provision of an anchor store, the chance to meet several challenges that are key to the resilience of the town centre and its future. The proposal goes beyond the requirements of carbon in use, and alternatively encourages other forms of travel, such as walking and cycling, as an alternative to the use of cars by the provision of on and off-site infrastructure improvements. Trip reduction and out-of-town travel is at the centre of this proposal in response to the climate emergency and the ever-changing shopping patterns. The scheme seeks to provide additional footfall to the town centre through a carefully considered and more efficient parking solution to enhance the opportunity and viability of other town centre businesses. The scheme will bring on-site parking in line with current and future standards by providing vital parent and child spaces, increased electric vehicle charging points, and an increase in the number of accessible spaces. In addition to this, the scheme will create a number of jobs via full and part-time positions, supporting enhanced opportunities for the younger workers within the town. It offers additional choice to shoppers when compared to the established mainstream retailers selling branded goods in this time of ever-increasing cost of living. It is acknowledged that our mixed views, and in particular reservations with regards to the felling of the existing trees, parking during the works, and the future of the skate park. In response to these, there is a commitment from the applicant to introduce considerably more trees on site than those lost, with an additional mitigation package at selected sites in and around Ivy Bridge. With regard to the parking during the works, measures have been included to aid access to the town centre during the construction phase, with proposed park and ride service, improved access to existing car parks within the town, and a package of other additional support measures. The proposed new location for the much improved skate park has been agreed and will be secured through the Section 106, but this is still subject to planning application and approval, as well as the additional improvements to the road corridor. This application represents a considerable investment within Ivy Bridge Town Centre, which would not be forthcoming if not delivered by these means. Other smaller towns within the region have demonstrated that a mix of national and independent retailers can exist together, and a decision to refuse the scheme would hinder the realisation of these proposals and not support the growing community of Ivy Bridge. Whereas a decision to support the scheme will send a clear message that Ivy Bridge is open to regeneration. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Simpson, I have no idea who you are, and we're supposed to be the applicants. Are you an officer?
No, I am an architect from the design team who's speaking on behalf of.
Speaking on behalf of South Hams rather than Aldi or anybody. Okay.
Yes, no.
Yes. So in terms of alternative sites, this has been something that's been quite queried because this is potentially a lot to squeeze into site. And obviously what's been lost is a wildlife corridor that's been spoken of and parking. So what alternative sites were considered?
As far as I'm aware, well, my involvement has been in the scheme outside of the site that we presented as part of our commission, which was the town centre site. That work, I believe, was completed prior to our involvement. But in addition to that, we've also done through the retail impact assessment, the town centre, existing facilities when the town centre have been tested, to see if we can get the equivalent required store in something that already exists, and that just isn't the case.
Yeah, I've got a few questions. That's okay. Yeah. So my second question is why that scale and design of a property? I mean, I understand that Aldi has its kind of, like many chain stores have their kind of look, and I know it's got its Aldi Fashion Leaf or something to. But could it have been scaled down? Could it have been a smaller store? Because obviously places like Tesco's and Co-op and all these other stores that are already in Ivybridge, as well as others that have their minis, metros and whatever's. I mean, is there an Aldi smaller version that could have been, maybe less controversial, better fit?
As far as I'm aware, this is the smallest size that Aldi operate in this country. Again, this was our brief to deliver this store of this size.
In terms of the carbon footprint, which you referred to, obviously that also has an implication in terms of the goods that are sold in a retail outlet. So are these going to be local? Is there going to be a room for local producers, or is it all just going to be anywhere and everywhere produce?
I don't believe I can answer that. That's down to the tenant and how they do their procurement lines. But I believe as a national retailer, that is they try to source as best they can.
Okay. And again, in terms of design itself, I mean, as points have been already raised about sort of concrete. I mean, my reference point for what looks similar to me is what I've seen in Newton Abbot as a multi-story car park and the impact that's had on the older area of Newton Abbot. Why was that? I mean, that's not a standard Aldi element, I would have thought. So is that something that's just been sort of added on? I can't understand why there's not more reference to local vernacular.
Again, when we took on the commission, we were presented with the pre-app outline drawings and response in those days. And at the end of the day, it was to try and maintain as much parking or minimise the impact of loss of parking whilst delivering the store on that site. So yes, potentially it could have gone in a different direction, but we also had to bear in mind the consideration of what impact it would have on the river corridor.
Would you agree that it's a strange conflict to replacing trees with parking when we have a ecological and climate emergency?
I don't believe that is my place to answer that today.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Councillor McKay.
Question. Sorry. About the design and the use of sustainable materials in the design. And a further question to that is that, I mean, I know that you've apparently doubled the number of PV on the roof of the building itself, but clearly the car park, the multi-storey car park, there is potential to put PV over the whole of the car park. There's also the possibility of ground source heating, and all of this could help sustain local businesses by reduced electricity costs. So has any of this been considered in the course of the design of this development?
It's been discussed, but I'm sure, as you appreciate, we are always governed by a set of limitations with the site, geothermal and anything going over the car park and bits like that. There's a cost premium attached to that, and we weren't asked to ultimately put that as an option. But I would say if
this was not part of your brief, basically.
No, we received a certain set of requirements from your organisation.
That's
what we have yes, designed to. But then in saying that, if we put PV all over the car park, it'll probably be more detrimental to the red corridor than the look or the minimal look that we're looking at the minute.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Brazone and Councillor Pringle.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think in your statement you said that there was a new and more flexible car parking regime that would enhance the shopping potential into town. Could you expand on that a bit? Explain to me why you think that is the case.
Yep, no, I'll try my best. This has come out from your parking department, again, which is listed in our in the parking document that was submitted. I believe that there'll be a more flexible range of tariffs going forward, which will give more option to people visiting the town centre. But also at the same time, you know, there will be 90 minutes free parking in there as well. So there is more flexibility within what will be offered, is my understanding.
If I could just come back on that, Chairman. I mean, one of the concerns that the businesses have in Ivy Bridge is that at the moment you've got all day car parking there, long stay car park, very cheap as well, £2 I think the whole day. Now, what it is a lot of the businesses are, you know, hairdressers, physiotherapists, that kind of thing, that obviously take more than, you know, that they need to have that kind of long-term car parking commitment. And plus the fact that the value, the car parking longer term that they are putting in is going to be massively increased, I think by 150% up to £5. So I just wonder how you can square that circle there, saying that actually by losing long-term car parking, massively increasing it, makes it more flexible and better for the businesses in Ivy Bridge.
Well, I think you need to look at it as a bit more of a widespread sort of picture. There has, you know, yes, there is a lot of car parking there at the minute, and you know it will be remodeled to what is proposed. But through other ways of active travel and accessing sites, you know, there should be generally a shift away from reliance on the car, because that fits part of the climate emergency. Everyone has got to get into that vein, I believe. And at the same time, I'm only a designer. I'm only governed by what I've been given to play with, as it were. So I'm afraid those questions might have to be turned internally for a more thorough answer.
Councillor Pringle.
Just ask, once the car park is closed off, if the development goes ahead, how are people going to access? Is there going to be no access across the bridge of the between the car park and Glanville's Mill?
I believe at the moment, in the construction management plan, there will be times when it will be shut. Works around that elevation or that side of the site, but without sort of going in depth, I believe that it will be open for a period.
And there's going to be no parking for disabled people during this time around the town. There's not going to be.
Again, as far as I'm aware and as far as I've been told, provision in the other car parks will be made available, but how that is delivered, I'm not in the know.
Another question is the 90 minutes free in the car park for the Audi. How is that going to be policed?
I believe at the minute there is the wish to have sort of people just be honest and to be managed for the first year to see whether people stay for their hour and go. Alternatively, as part of the application, there is an AMP camera position located which will monitor it. And as to how that's worked out, that is something to be discussed between Southampton and the tenant going forward.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Right, Councillor Long, I had you already written down, so I think you had a question that, yeah. No.
Thank you, Chairman. There was the comment made by the planning officer, the building and car park cannot be secured without loss of the trees. question to you is, obviously, what you've got is a plan that started with a sort of, obviously, we've got a local developer, clear patch, and we'll develop it. There are obviously issues with the trees. You could see features there, you know, everything that existed. Have you or did you come up with any alternate plans other than sort of the basic that you've got there? Were there other scopes? And I'm considering, you know, other designs considered, and also rather than spreading the car park out, you know, was there a consideration for alternate designs, which has already been raised with more local vernacular, but also potentially sitting the store on top of the car parking, elements like that? Were there alternatives prepared rather than?
Short answer is yes. We pushed this building around the site every other way possible. Due to the size and the tenant requirements, it's quite tricky to get it to fit pretty much anywhere else than where it's shown. We looked at rotating it 90 degrees and putting it more in line with the hedge line that was to be removed, but then we felt that would be even have more of an impact on the rear corridor, which we were considering at the time as part of it. It was also prevalent in our mind that, you know, we were trying to maintain parking numbers as best we could without sort of chipping away at it. So yes, we have looked at several different layouts, but again, by the time you get the building where it is, when we received the scheme, we hadn't addressed any of the flood mitigation, which had to be looked at. So that's had an impact on the building location. So it's a very technical site, and I think the outcome that we've got to is a decent balance between requirements against construction as well.
Thank you. I don't have anybody else on any more questions. No, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right, members. We're now into the debate. Oh, sorry. Beg your pardon. I'm in a rush. Yeah, all right. Two more, yeah. Beg your pardon. I don't think we can have a comfort break in the middle of it. That's a good one.
Beyond the meeting.
I remember feeling on that at the moment. We've been here some time. Pardon? Yeah.
Chairman, it might be appropriate to have to take a break after the speakers.
Yes. Right. Okay. Sorry, Mayor. Oh, apologies. If you'd like to have your 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. I'd just like to say I'm Councillor Sarah Ladke, Mayor of Ivybridge.
I must admit, I'll admit this. When I saw your name, do I attempt to pronounce it or let you?
I know that's the normal feeling when people see my name. So there we go. I saved you the problem. I refer councillors to the Town Council's full submitted objection. The application goes against the policies of the MPPF, the local plan, the neighbourhood plan, and Southam's own climate change and biodiversity policies. The neighbourhood plan has been cherry-picked to demonstrate the reasons why Southam's should build on their car park, described in the proposal as a brownfield site. It is not. This car park is well used and the lifeblood for the town centre. Does the application truly address the requirements of the IMP2 policy, in particular in the following ways? No master plan approach to include all elements for this site in the neighbourhood plan. How can the destruction of notable and veteran trees as independently documented by the Woodland Trust be replaced with a two-storey car park? Replacing an open space with an undercover area likely to become a hotspot for antisocial behaviour and crime. Slide 1. The police comments have been ignored in the report, but on the screen now. The regeneration project does not feature a second bridge or enhance the riverbank and places an overbearing building right next to it. The removal of a large hedgerow, currently attenuating rainfall and providing a permeable area, surely does not reduce flood risk. A cheaply clad box building is not high quality design and does not respond to local character. Parking in an Audi car park is not public parking, and so public parking is being reduced by half. Why is Southampton District Council actively forcing the public to shop in a commercial store? Is the 90 minutes free parking set in perpetuity? The Co-op object due to the implications for the viability of the town. They state that your retail assessment is incorrect and their turnover is much less than your report, and say Aldi will trade in competition, not alongside. Reports only consider like-for-like grocery sales, no other impact. The Kaki report was produced before the pandemic. Shopping habits have changed in favour of the town. The Chamber of Commerce have vociferously objected. There are hundreds and hundreds of objections from residents. An alternative suitable location to the east of the town is already allocated for retail and employment and is identified in the Joint Local Plan TTV6 and therefore holds more weight as an allocated site than IMPT in the neighbourhood plan. The proposed park and ride facility uses a car park outside the parish over a mile from the application site. People won't park and walk, and the proposed bus is not suitable for many. There's been no equality impact assessment done on the changes to paths, transport and parking during construction. It is not realistic to include Keaton Road in parking strategy due to users receiving court threats. Also, there is no assessment of impact on street parking. Harford Road is needed for short-term parking to access the pharmacy, doctor's surgery, school users who have no parking on site. The parking does not meet SPD guidance for a store of this size, should be 135 spaces, not 99, and so places more pressure on the reduced number of public spaces on the lower floor. Parking isn't used day to day. The capacity is needed for town festivals, events at the leisure centre and watermark, banking vans and the breast screening unit. Its loss will be devastating for residents. Pushing the Thursday market out during construction and insufficient facilities within the design will bring an end to this very busy market. Slide, please. Loss of skate park before replacement is ready is unacceptable. The proposed location is risky in terms of gaining planning permission, and the S106 fallback of £165,000 is not sufficient for a new park and securing a suitable town centre site. The initial Southampton consultation with the community was pre-COVID and did not make the public aware of the implications, as shown when the Town Council performed its own survey with residents this year. Since the pandemic, the town has a full retail offer, 0 empty shops, with many new shops opening. Ivybridge is regenerating itself. The plans go against District Council Objective 3.9 of the Climate Change and Biodiversity Strategy 2020, requiring new development led by Southampton to be exemplar. The supporting reports appear biased on behalf of the applicant for whom they are working. Slide. In the case of the 280-year-old veteran oak, in the report, the consultant said they couldn't measure it. When challenged by the Independent Wood Trust Commission, they then stated it wasn't correct size to be veteran. If they haven't measured it, how do they know? The concrete base of the northernmost bike rack is on the roots of another notable oak tree, not even been treated by the reports. The applicant referred to the tree belt as scrubland and ticked the box in the application to say that there were no trees that might be important as part of the landscape character. Your own tree officer comments are shown here on screen. The S106 biodiversity offset being proposed to allow outside of the parish is unacceptable. The Town Council overwhelmingly objects, and we urge you as applicant and planning authority to refuse this application.
Thank you for that. Questions, members? The Mayor? No questions. Right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Go first. Better Abbott, and I believe you've got some slides.
You haven't got.
No, doesn't like it outside. Okay. Right. Thank you very much for those of you who are able to come.
Why don't you walk over to where they do the presentation from there?
No.
Oh, no. Yeah, then the members of the public can see you rather than just your back of your head.
So members, thank you for coming along to the site visit, those of you who could make it. And it's not just a commuter town. For those of you living in the South Hams and the lovely places outside of Ivybridge, I know this is not exactly planning, but it's our home. And I'll comment on that in relationship to the other towns in a little while. We have a history going back to 1280. I could tell you more, but it won't be so relevant for planning. Ivybridge currently has 261 parking spaces under South Hams control. 261. Totnes has 782. Kingsbridge and Dartmouth also have more, 500, 400. Population of our town is 12,000. And yet we have the lowest number of car parking spaces available to us. And to lose 99, to lose 5 altogether, and to lose another 99 to one shop is just disproportionate. If you think that Ivybridge is being held back and needs regenerating, and it may be car parking we need, not a store in the middle of the town. It's hard to know when you think that the car park is busy. If it gets to 70% or 90%, do people then just move on? There is a real problem with hunting for a space. This car park is actually one of the proposed, on the slide, is one of the proposed places for the park and ride. This is the railway station car park. You can see it's quite well used at the moment. You'll argue back, perhaps, that that's a temporary situation because of the house building going on. We're looking south here, and there's house building to the south and to the right, to the west, and also to the left. And so there are a lot of construction workers there, but that's not due to finish anytime soon. And these spaces in between those already taken are what is proposed for the park and ride. Will people setting out in their car go to a park and ride to then pick up a bus to go into the town? Well, maybe those who are going to work in the town do, because as Councillor Brazil was saying earlier, a lot of the businesses that are in Ivybridge are not very obvious. I didn't say that bit, but you said that. People need to come and go. They need long-term parking, but they also need to come and go during the day. There are people working, for instance, in the NHS facility, upstairs, out of sight from everyday site, that will need to go off to clients and come back again during the day. They need parking, they need it to be accessible. They wouldn't be getting a park and ride bus up to here. It puts into question the whole nature of that business. There's a second high quality business in the Sound, just near the main car park that will be built on, where engineers are going out to site and coming back again. These will be affected in their day-to-day business. But for shopping and carrying shopping away back up to the park and ride facility, it's just not going to happen. Once you're in a car, you'll go where parking is available, and it's available for free in Plimpton. The challenge was made amongst the objections. What would it be like to have an Aldi built on the Quay car park at Kingsbridge, or on Leachwell Gardens in Totnes, or in the Mayor's Avenue car park in Dartmouth, or in Creek car park at Salcombe? Such a thing dominating so many spaces would just take away from your town as it would do from our town. There is a distinctive argument going on between professionals about whether the tree in the Devon hedge bank is a veteran tree. And as our expert here has said, the decision that you take on that is crucial to the outcome. But what we've got is two experts saying two different things. What were members of the committee to do with this information when it's not clear one way or the other? You have to work with something. And if there is a veteran tree, we are not supposed to build there if there is an alternative site. There is an alternative site. There's an alternative site which is not considered in the original. I didn't ask questions of the proposer here. Proposal goes back to 2018 that we should use the assets of SHDC, and it's that which governs this development, not the development of a site for the best of the town, but for the best for the finances of the district council, which of course benefits all of the residents of Ivybridge. If there's an income, then council tax will not go up by as much as proposed. It is not a self-aggrandizing set of money. Nevertheless, for the best for the town, that alternative site could be used. It's large. It's on a new junction with a roundabout to help the traffic flow. It would be a very good place to go. And it saves us mistakenly taking down a veteran tree when that is not necessary. When members stood on the co-op side of the footbridge and looked over the footbridge, what they saw was green. When you crossed that bridge, what you saw upriver and downriver was green. And in the future, the dangerous future, is that we stand on the co-op side of that footbridge and we'll look at a 2-story steel and concrete structure which will be just 2 meters away from the riverbank. This can't be right. It can't. The construction will give us a temporary loss of parking. Temporary is 8 months. 8 months, when the example given already was that during the replacement of one of our 2 bridges, we only have one now, we don't have a circular route, which is a great shame, but that's not a council issue. It is a public realm issue. We could have improved the public realm over the crossing. We could have had a park. That's not presented to us today. But this removal of the bridge and its replacement was a 2-day affair. Very well done. Very nice. Very great to have a new bridge. It'll last another 60 years. But you have heard the example that the business owner had a reduction in their takings and the reduction of their footfall of 50% on the first day. So much so they didn't open on the second day. And that car park was still there. That car park only required people to park to walk up river to what I call Newbridge, because it went in 1835. So it's compared to our other one, it's new. And down the other side. And they didn't do that. What are they going to do for 8 months? Temporary. And then we have this supermarket in which I will shop if it's there. I will prefer to shop it if it's further east. Shop in it if it's further east. But in those 8 months, what on earth is going to happen to the regenerated town of Ivybridge? Regenerated now, recovered from the COVID, recovered from the many empty shops. How many shops do we have empty on the 4th Street at the moment? 1. And that's because it's subject to a legal situation. Ivybridge is regenerated. We don't need to do this. We don't need to take away the livelihood of our shopkeepers and our businesses for an 8-month period. There will be no Ivybridge in the future after that. So that's my argument as a ward member. I'll say something later under the committees.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott. Councillor Pringle, would you?
I'll stand up. I don't need to go away. Councillor Abbott has taken a lot of things I would want to say anyway. I think the main issue, not only with the ecological part of it, it's the car parks. In fact, it's going to be closed for 8 months. Also, the breast screening unit, where's that going to go? A very important part. And also and also the Thursday market. Very important to local residents, very well used, very popular. So those are two items that I don't know whether Chris Brooke be allowed to say whether it's what's going to happen to them. But there's other things other than the alley store being there that's an issue, and the breast screening is important. Lots of people come from outside to go to that, and that there won't be no facility for it. So I'll probably speak a bit later on.
Yeah. I'm going to ask you a question. Have you had an answer back on that market from anybody? Not at all. And it's important. Okay. So that's going to keep you waiting a bit longer, Councillor Brown, but yes, we will have a recess for 5 minutes so we can have a couple of things. Well, ladies and gentlemen, just bear in mind we might still be streaming or recording.
So, Leslie, can I just ask you, where do I pause the meeting? Is it in Restream or in OBS?
I think yeah, I reckon that's fine.
Still,
Yeah, no.